Stop. Breathe. There's an uncomfortable truth before you right now. The loneliness you call routine is rewriting your mind from the inside, and I'm here to name it, bluntly, so you can see it clearly and choose what to do with it. I didn't come to offer plastic consolation or decorative phrases. I came like someone who shines a cold light in a closed room. The light reveals dust, reveals cracks, but also reveals doors. The first thing that needs to be said is simple and profound. It's not about being physically alone, but about living without witnesses. The absence of someone who knows your true contours creates a discrete void that alters perception, mood, and courage. The body learns to expect the worst. Sleep becomes shallow. Thought, suspended. The mind, deprived of human echo, begins to confuse prudence with danger, silence with rejection, autonomy with giving up. Do you realize this? My role here is to serve as a mirror with sharp edges, not just to reflect, but to cut away what's left over. I speak the truth because I respect its strength and its capacity for transformation. Those who label those who have no friends as cold or antisocial describe the surface and ignore what lies beneath. Many people feel too much, perceive too much, and therefore retreat. They don't flee from humanity out of contempt, but out of saturation with signals. Micro-expressions, broken tones, shallow promises. Where most see normality, they see inconsistency. And the body learns proximity can hurt. The psychology of isolation is not a metaphor. It's physiology. The brain interprets persistent separation as a threat and triggers pain circuits. Heart rate changes, alertness increases, the risk radar goes off. But today's hyperconnectivity is a false scenario. Many voices, little presence. Attention is not connection. Validation is not intimacy. You can receive 1,000 reactions and still not feel seen. Why? Because seeing requires time, patience, genuine interest, and that cannot be outsourced. This loneliness almost never arises from a dramatic collapse. It accumulates. A ridiculed confidence here, a broken promise there, an absence on a crucial day, an ignored message that becomes the norm. Little by little, your system learns to economize on exposure. You stop inviting, stop insisting, stop waiting. You recalibrate the narrative. I prefer my corner. The question I ask you is direct. Is your retreat still healing, or has it become a trench? When internal dialogue takes the place of the world, a silent theater unfolds. You stage conversations that never happened, rewrite old scenes with perfect answers that will never come, revisit broken loyalties as if feeling a sensitive tooth. The danger is building an entire identity from unresolved fractures. And here I intervene. You are not the sum of your rejections. You are the sum of the choices you make based on them. What do you choose to keep? What do you choose to abandon? There's a name for the habit that holds you back. Learned social helplessness. After failed attempts, the brain begins to associate initiative with pain and refuses to move. Even when someone good comes along, the guard remains high. You interpret kindness as risk and consistency as artifice. You see signs where there are none, filling in gaps with suspicion. It's unfair to yourself and to the other person. But I understand, it's the method your mind has found to reduce harm. The problem is that it reduces life. I invite you to a firm and achievable adjustment. Convert vigilance into presence. I'm not asking you to become expansive or to expose yourself indiscriminately. I'm asking for fairness to reality. Observe the fact, not the projection. Sustain 5 more seconds of eye contact. Answer the simple question you always avoid with completeness. Accept a brief encounter without scripting the outcome. This seems small, but it alters circuits. The brain changes through repetition, not miracles. You train the muscle of trust with micro-gestures of reality. It's also necessary to acknowledge the role of time. When no one shares their days, time thickens. The hours become heavy. Dates lose their flavor. Milestones cease to matter. However, within this silence, something valuable can be born. Lucidity. The difference lies in the place from which you operate. If solitude is chosen, it heals. If it is imposed, it hardens. Do you know which side you're on? I want you to understand, soberly, that depth is no excuse for perpetual isolation. People who think and feel intensely need bonds of the same density, not audiences. Friendship is less about frequency and more about recognition. It's where words don't need to prove their worth to exist. Without that, the mind distances itself from reality and begins to operate in defensive mode. It interprets lateness as disinterest, pauses as abandonment, imperfection as a threat. Do you perceive this pattern in yourself? When was the last time you left another flawed human being in front of you and still stayed? My presence in this narrative is not that of a judge. It is that of an austere guide. I point out the risk of self-deception and offer you an objective path. Radical responsibility for your own voice. Instead of waiting for the ideal invitation, become someone who invites with clarity. Instead of anticipating rejection, establish explicit limits and observe the response. Instead of speaking to be admired, speak to be understood. This shift in focus, from applause to truth, reorganizes your social field. It distances those who need spectacle and brings closer those who breathe depth. There will be discomfort. There will be a desire to return to the familiar layer. It's expected. Amor fati, here, is not about romanticizing solitude, but about accepting reality as material to work with. What happened, happened. There is no editing of the past that produces a present bond. There is action in the now, the gesture that rebuilds trust, the listening that recognizes the other, the presence that does not give up at the first noise. So, I leave you with these questions to burn through your night-like embers. Who have you become to survive without connection? And what of that needs to die so that life can flow again? What belief needs to be trimmed today so that a meeting is possible tomorrow? And deep down, what do you fear losing when you allow yourself to be seen? Control, or the identity you invented to endure absence? If you've made it this far, you already have something many lose: lucidity in progress. And lucidity demands action. In the next step, we'll take this blade a little deeper. Not to wound, but to open a passage where the armor of years has become accustomed to calling home. You wake up and, before you even remember your name, your phone demands a gesture. There are notifications, yes, but no presence. It's the first dissonance of the day. Many signals, little meaning. I come in here, as if touching your shoulder without ceremony and saying, look firmly at what you call normal. In the elevator, someone comments on the weather. You respond automatically. You feel there's a whole ocean behind a simple phrase, but habit pushes everything to the smooth surface. That's how loneliness operates when it masquerades as routine. It occupies the space between gesture and desire, between presence and encounter. I could list studies, but I prefer to start with the field where your life truly happens, the everyday. That's how the strength of the connection is lost, silently. At work, you deliver with precision and accept even the slightest praise as if it were just reward. In a meeting, a comment of yours crosses the room and no one picks it up. It's not hostility, it's collective distraction. Once again, the experience finds no witness and the brain registers. Better to speak only what is strictly necessary. I interrupt this script. Don't confuse efficiency with existence. Delivering is not the same as belonging. You can be impeccable and still have nowhere to store your own joy. When this repeats itself, the body understands that celebrating is dangerous. To avoid embarrassment, you prefer not to feel so much. At the market, the line moves slowly. You observe the shopping carts, as if reading compressed biographies. Fruit for someone trying, processed foods for someone exhausted, flowers for an apology that might not work. This reading gives you the strange sensation of closeness to strangers. Paradoxically, it's easier to feel tenderness for strangers than to maintain intimacy with someone you know. There are subtler shifts than they seem. The first, the tiredness you attribute to your schedule, might be the burden of talking to yourself for too long. Pull the thread. When was the last time you explained a joy to someone to the end, without interrupting yourself because you thought it unimportant? The second shift, the other person's silence isn't always disinterest. The third, use your lucidity to create space, not to confirm suspicions. I'm training you for a fairer reading of the world. Facts before projections, questions before verdicts. There's a time of day when loneliness seems to change texture. For many, it's on the way home, when the lights in apartments form a mosaic of lives you haven't lived. For others, it's in the afternoon, when you realize no one needed to know where you were. Without contrast, any shadow seems gigantic. This can be corrected. Let's imagine a scene. The end of the workday. You decide to accept an invitation for coffee. The person is polite and kind, but something inside you is wary of the slightest inconsistencies, as if you need to justify your habit of withdrawing. When the conversation takes an unexpected turn, your body hesitates between fleeing and staying. Stay 2 more minutes. Sometimes that's enough. Another situation. At night, you walk through the neighborhood and realize you always choose the same streets, the same lit windows, as if searching for a reliable landscape that doesn't demand new versions of yourself. I suggest a small detour, a different street, an open bookstore, an untested park bench. You're not seeking connections, you're seeking less addictive conditions to rediscover yourself. You ask me, what if I try and it's ridiculous? You already pay the high price of not trying. Speak clearly. Name what you can offer and what you need. Ambiguity is an expensive luxury for those rebuilding trust. There is mystery at play, yes, but it's not esoteric. It's the mystery of the encounter. We will never know beforehand who will be a bridge and who will be an alley. Your job is to go to the corner of possibility and accept that some encounters fail. Think about the beginning of the evening, when you're washing the dishes and a thought comes rushing back like a tide. I'll answer that message later. You postpone it. The moment cools, the connection doesn't happen. Open your drafts folder. How many never sent replies? I propose a simple protocol to break the cycle now. 3 movements. First, breathe for 10 seconds until your body comes out of defense mode. Second, name it with minimal honesty. I saw your message, and it touched me because of this. Third, offer a small, concrete gesture. I have 15 minutes tomorrow at 6 p.m. Is that okay? When life senses your availability, it reopens paths. On the subway or bus, you notice faces that repeat themselves without ever being named. A restrained nod from the doorman, the barista's recollection as they write your order, the look of someone sweeping the sidewalk before the day begins. These micro-encounters, if recognized, cease to be noise and become stitches in the social fabric. Say the name of the person serving you. Return the nod. Ask something that isn't scripted. You're not asking for instant intimacy. You're practicing visible presence. And what happens when chance calls? An unknown number rings, you almost ignore it, but you answer. It was your neighbor with a package that got mixed up. You go downstairs, chat for 2 minutes longer than necessary, and discover a shared interest. You realize the essential. Chance favors those who are available. What sabotages you isn't people. It's your rigid self-image. Let go of a border. Allow yourself to be imperfect. Humanity arrives through cracks, not through shop windows. To maintain balance, adopt a method. The 24-hour rule for responding. 2 invitations per week. Even simple ones like going for a walk. 1 dignified refusal without made-up excuses, and 1 invitation initiated by you. Test consistency, not intensity. 3 brief encounters with the same person say more than 1 exceptional night. Observe patterns. Who keeps their promises? Who listens without competing? Who can tolerate silence without rushing? That's where the connection that matters lies. Finally, a self-audit. Take stock of the places where you hide. Endless tasks, open screens, impersonal opinions. Erase the trophies of self-sufficiency that only serve pride. And, faced with the alarm that goes off at the slightest sign of uncertainty, ask the key question: is it data or assumption? If it's assumption, suspend the verdict, seek confirmation, take a short step towards reality. You don't need epic courage. You need honest repetition. In the end, it all comes down to a simple yet demanding discipline: presence without performance. It's not about being interesting, it's about being genuine. When you stop dramatizing your own story and embrace it as a work in progress, something solid emerges in the center of your heart. This solidity is discreet, but the world recognizes it. People are drawn to what is stable. And here I leave a signal for the next step. There's a key piece you've been avoiding moving. An old gesture that needs to be undone to make room for the new. You know what it is. The instant you name it, the entire board shifts. You've spent so much time avoiding your inner self that now, even when you try to return, the road feels foreign. I know. It's like that for almost everyone who has lived too long on the defensive. Becoming unreachable comes at a high price. You survive, but you don't belong. You function, but you don't flourish. And when life finally asks in a clear voice, "Where are you?" the answer comes muffled, not from a lack of words, but from an excess of versions. Versions created to fit situations, please contexts, or avoid discomfort. I am here to break with this logic, not to disrupt, but to reveal what was already in ruins. When was the last time you engaged in a connection without holding back? Without measuring your words? Without translating feelings into safe comments? How many affections have you edited to keep the atmosphere light? How many times have you disappeared from yourself to continue fitting into other people's narratives? The absence of friends is not just a relational void, it's also a result of the emotional architecture you've learned to build. Each time you silenced your truth to preserve a connection, that connection became less yours. Until the day silence became your identity, and no one knew where you hurt anymore. Have you ever noticed the difference between being heard and being listened to? Hearing is mechanical. Listening is an act of presence. Many who live without friends have never truly been listened to. They were attended to, tolerated, orbited. But real presence? The kind that remains when the conversation ends? Rare. And I state this with certainty. The absence of listening alters the brain. Trust weakens. The internal narrative becomes an uninterrupted soundtrack of self-justification. And, in this noise, no external voice seems trustworthy enough to enter. How many conversations have you had only with yourself? How many rehearsed reconciliations? How many repeated accusations? When the mind becomes accustomed to being its only audience, it becomes both judge and victim. This is dangerous. Because internal judgment, without debate, becomes tyranny, and psychic tyranny does not allow for renewal. So I ask, what truths have you accepted as definitive simply because you had no one to challenge them with? Time, that patient sculptor, carves in silence, but it also hardens. As the years go by, the absence of connection translates into rigidity, emotional, behavioral, even physical. Have you noticed how the body responds to isolation? Shoulders hunch, breathing shortens, the gaze avoids lingering. Posture betrays what discourse tries to deny. And yet, even in this scenario, there are gaps. One of them is this: you are reading this now. That is already a crack in the isolation. The question is, what will you do with that crack? Will you patch it up with distraction or widen it with real action? Remember, you don't leave your armor without making a sound. The metal scratches, the body feels strange in the open air. But there is beauty in that strangeness. It indicates that you are alive enough to try again. What if you find someone who sees your excess as depth, not as burden? What if your intensity is actually a call to connect with someone who has also lived too much on the inside? What you've been calling inadequacy might just be a lack of a suitable setting. No orchid blooms on asphalt. The issue was never you. It was the environment. So why keep pruning yourself to fit where there was never a garden? Take stock of the places where your presence is not celebrated, only tolerated. Notice the conversations where you leave feeling smaller than when you entered. Identify the gazes that don't reciprocate yours, and, in doing so, don't lament, reorganize. You have the right to choose where you focus your attention, where you sow your energy. Loneliness, sometimes, is not a lack of company, but an excess of poorly allocated concessions. When was the last time you surprised yourself? Not with something external, but with a trait of yours that you had forgotten. A carefree laugh, an old desire, spontaneous courage. These flashes are not random. They are vivid memories of a version of yourself that still pulsates beneath the layers of self-preservation. And I propose, bring that version to the surface for a day. See how the world responds. You've been thinking that you need to be interesting to be loved, but what truly matters is wholeness. And wholeness isn't made of perfect phrases or carefully controlled appearances. It's made of imperfect presence, of unvarnished truth, of sustaining one's own vulnerability even when no one guarantees applause. It's in these moments, the uneditable ones, that the other person sees the humanity that connects. No one bonds with a character. The connection happens with exposed flaws, with laughter without reason, with the uncomfortable pause that doesn't seek to conceal anything. You fear that by showing too much, you will be rejected. But have you noticed that hiding too much also pushes people away? The fear of being seen is the twin of the desire to be found. While you camouflage your pain to appear strong, you also hide your rarest beauty, the ability to feel the world acutely, broadly, deeply. This is not a flaw. It's the trait of someone forged in silence. Those who have learned to be self-sufficient, when they choose to share, offer more than company. They offer solid ground. Here's where we insert a final provocation. Before the turning point, what if the next life-changing connection isn't with another person, but with your own truth? Can you sustain it, even when it doesn't please you, doesn't entertain you, doesn't comfort you? If the answer is yes, the rest will follow naturally. The right connections are attracted to wholeness, not performance. In the next stage, we will walk through this minefield of intimacy. But for now, it's up to you. Will you pretend once again that everything is all right? Or will you finally admit that you deserve more than emotional survival? The answer, whatever it may be, has already begun to reshape the path. There are people who haven't spoken to anyone for days, others for weeks, and some for months, and yet they are surrounded by people. I could begin this section with statistics, such as the World Health Organization's data on the impacts of isolation on mental health, but I prefer to offer something harder to ignore: a real scene. A man enters a coffee shop at 7 in the morning. He orders his usual, sits in the same corner, and opens the newspaper as if performing a ritual. Every day the barista nods familiarly, but never exchanges more than 2 words. One day, he doesn't appear. The next day, he doesn't either. After a week, someone asks, "And the gentleman with the newspaper?" They later discover that he had died days before, alone. No one had missed him. I bring up this image not to appeal to sentimentality, but to point out a phenomenon. Loneliness today is no longer physical absence, it's social invisibility. And it's happening right now to millions of people who, like you perhaps, have learned to function without being heard. Competent, present, useful people, but not remembered. And that corrodes, because human beings need not only to exist, they need to be perceived. I affirm, mutual perception is the cement of relationships. Where there is no witness, there is psychic erosion. This is where a disconcerting fact comes in. Studies in social neuroscience show that the brain of a person deprived of lasting bonds begins to activate patterns similar to those of intense physical pain. This means that chronic loneliness is registered in the body as real, not symbolic, suffering. Brain waves fluctuate. The ability to concentrate decreases. The body loses its sense of time. This is not drama, it's biology. Those who live invisibly gradually disappear from themselves. And it is in this process that silent habits of self-denial emerge. Have you ever noticed how lonely people tend to apologize for taking up space? They move away when speaking, lower their voices, sit on the edges. Not out of politeness, but because they have internalized that the center does not belong to them. This doesn't happen by chance. It arises from accumulation, micro-exclusions, small rejections, systematic interruptions, glances that don't return. The soul learns to deflect so as not to get in the way. But there's a detail that few people see. This type of behavior is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of adaptive intelligence. Those who haven't received acceptance have learned to anticipate isolation. But what was once a shield becomes a prison. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're actually trapping yourself. I insist on this because many blame themselves for no longer being able to open up, without realizing that it's not a character flaw, but a learned reflex. And everything that is learned can be rewritten. There's a famous experiment conducted by psychologists at the University of Chicago in which subway passengers were instructed to initiate conversations with strangers during their commute. The expectation was for widespread discomfort. The result was surprising. Both those who initiated and those who received the interactions reported a significant increase in well-being. This tells us something powerful. We are all waiting for a contact that no one has the courage to initiate. It's not disinterest, it's fear. So, the question I propose is practical. What can you do in the next 24 hours to break this cycle? Perhaps it's not a grand gesture. Perhaps it's a less automatic response to someone who wishes you good morning. Perhaps it's asking something with genuine interest, or simply maintaining eye contact for 2 seconds longer. Don't wait for the perfect opportunity to connect. It's built in the details. Now, imagine a daily life where every gesture carries the intention of seeing and being seen. Imagine sitting on a public bench without the protection of your cell phone. Imagine talking to someone without thinking about the answer, just listening. Does it seem small? Well, these small rituals have the power to unearth parts of yourself that were buried under haste and fear. Intimacy doesn't begin with grand revelations, it begins with small moments of stillness. And if you think you've already tried and failed, allow me to rephrase the question. Did you try with someone who could receive? There are people with open ears but closed eyes. They listen, but they don't see. And there are those who see, but don't stay. It's not about blaming others, but about recognizing. The quality of the connection depends on mutual availability. Persisting in the wrong place is also a form of escape. You might ask yourself, what if I show myself and they don't like it? I answer clearly. The version of you that hides itself is no longer working. You won't be loved for being neutral. You will be noticed when you are whole. This doesn't guarantee universal acceptance, but it guarantees authenticity. And that's what sustains true bonds. The bonds that endure are not made of perfection, but of truth sustained over time. And speaking of time, there's a subtle psychological phenomenon that needs to be understood. People who spend a lot of time alone develop a kind of altered perception of time. The days lengthen, but the months evaporate. This creates a feeling of life standing still, where everything is passing by, except you. To break this cycle, it's necessary to ritualize time. Create milestones. A dinner once a week, a phone call every 3 days, a walk with someone at fixed times. This restores to the body the notion of cycle, of continuity, of narrative. And where there is narrative, there is belonging. Finally, understand that emerging from isolation is not heroic, it's artisanal. It's not made of grand acts, but of constant gestures. A sincere compliment, a message sent, an invitation without guarantees. Those who wait for certainty to act have already lost the present. And those who act despite their fear are writing a new emotional biography, one where there are no solitary protagonists, but real people in the process of reconnection. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to deactivate the protocols that keep your light contained. Your presence is necessary, not as a tool, not as a function, but as existence. And if you still doubt this, ask yourself, who was the last person who truly saw you? If the answer is vague, it's not too late. There's still time to be found. But first, you need to decide to be visible. From here on, every choice you make is a way to stop disappearing. You can hide from many things, but not from your own desire to belong. It reappears even when you swear you no longer miss it. A glance that lasts a second longer, a phrase spoken truthfully, a memory that resurfaces for no reason, is all it takes. Belonging is a biological need, yes, but also a movement of the soul, wanting to be recognized by someone who sees beyond words. And that's exactly why its absence transforms us. The mind, when deprived of witnesses, begins to lie to itself. It constructs defensive narratives. I prefer it this way. Nobody's any good. Better alone than disappointed. But these phrases, spoken from within, harden. They create walls where there were once windows. This is where the internal distortion begins. Because you not only start avoiding others, you start distrusting yourself. The question changes from, will anyone understand me, to, am I still understandable? And this is more serious than it seems. Because when you no longer recognize yourself, everything around you loses clarity. Emotional references become distant. Values become confused. Time slips away without a mark. You can be everywhere, do everything right, and still feel detached from your own life. Some people, in situations like this, create a persona, a kind of parallel identity that serves to navigate the world. This persona is efficient, polite, functional, and empty. He knows what to say, how to act, how to maintain a stable appearance, but he doesn't truly feel. He doesn't get emotional when he should. He doesn't connect. And the most dangerous thing, he convinces you that he's real. Until one day, alone, you can no longer distinguish where the disguise ends and where what's left of you begins. There's a name for this: emotional alienation. It's when you become a stranger to yourself. And this estrangement isn't poetic. It's paralyzing. It makes you doubt even the smallest joys. You hear a song that once moved you, and it no longer does. You visit a beloved place, and everything seems pale. And the natural tendency is to blame the world. Nothing excites me anymore. People have changed. Everything has lost its charm. But perhaps what has changed isn't the world. It's your capacity to be affected by it. And that is recoverable. Yes, you can recover your sensitivity. You can relearn how to feel. But this requires a break. There is no return to wholeness without a radical decision to break with the version of yourself that only survives. And this break hurts. Because it involves letting go of the justifications you've been repeating for years. It involves stepping down from a position of control. It involves admitting, I miss them. Saying this is revolutionary. Because we live in a culture where missing someone has become a sign of weakness, where vulnerability has become synonymous with instability. But the truth is different. Only those who miss someone are still alive. Only those who acknowledge their absence still desire their presence. You might be wondering if this process is reversible. It is, but it doesn't happen in a straight line. And it almost never comes with euphoria. Sometimes, the first sign of return is discomfort, a feeling of inadequacy where there was once comfort, a silence that begins to hurt, a desire to speak that finds no voice. Pay attention to these signs. They are proof that something inside you is moving, and everything that moves still lives. Now, imagine a simple situation. Someone asks how you are, and instead of saying, I'm fine, you reply, I'm trying to understand. This seemingly insignificant response can alter an entire relationship. because it opens up space for the other person to enter. It doesn't force intimacy, but invites it. And the invitation, when it comes from truth, is irresistible. Truth has a kind of beauty that attracts those who also carry silent truths. And it is in these encounters, rare but real, that you begin to return. But there's an obstacle, a type of paralyzing resistance, the fear of seeming needy. How many times have you refrained from sending a message, extending an invitation, or responding enthusiastically just to avoid seeming searching? But there's a crucial detail here. Those who don't seek, don't find. The fear of seeming too available is what keeps you from the relationships you desire. And those who constantly try to appear disinterested end up finding exactly that, disinterest. Lukewarm relationships, half-hearted dialogues, bonds that can't hold weight. So I propose a reversal. Instead of hiding your search, embrace it with elegance. Say, I'm in the opening phase. I want to create bonds with more presence. I'm choosing to emerge from anesthesia. These phrases don't scare those who are ready. They only push away those who can't handle depth. And this filter is necessary, because deep down, you don't want just any contact. You want real contact. You want to be read in the subtext. You want to be welcomed in the intervals. You want to be seen even when you're not explaining yourself. And here we arrive at the twist. Perhaps the loneliness you feel today isn't the absence of others, but the absence of yourself in relationships. You've edited yourself so much, protected yourself so much, that you've stopped showing up. And how could they find what you've hidden? How could they love what you don't offer? This isn't guilt, it's an invitation. You can still reverse this. You can still choose to show up. And showing up, in this context, isn't about exposing yourself to everyone. It's about revealing yourself to the right people. Those few who have the structure to receive your truth without turning it into a burden. Don't wait for the ideal scenario. It won't come. Start with what you have. An honest conversation with someone secure. A request for company without excuses. A gesture of affection without fear of seeming fragile. The return to wholeness is made like this. Gesture by gesture. Presence by presence. And each of these choices undoes the old knots. Until one day, without warning, you realize you feel again. You laugh for no reason again. You are moved by music again. You are affected again. And it's when this happens that you understand. The worst part of loneliness wasn't the absence of the other person. It was your absence from yourself. The reunion, then, ceases to be a search and becomes a reconnection. You don't find yourself outside. You rediscover yourself from within. And that is the greatest act of friendship anyone can do for themselves. You've come this far because something inside you still pulsates, still searches, still wants. Maybe you don't know what to name it. Maybe you don't know where to begin. But the simple fact that you've walked through this narrative proves that you haven't given up on yourself. And that in itself is an act of courage. There are those who live for decades without ever looking at themselves with this honesty. You are now at a crossroads, to keep functioning or to start living. And I am here, not to tell you what to do, but to shine a light on that blind spot where you pretend everything is all right, but you know it's not. There's an intimate choice that changes everything, to stop negotiating with your own absence, because that's what we do when we let life pass us by while postponing the decision to be present in it. 1 day, 2, 10 years. We get used to living in waiting mode, hoping that someone will discover us, but the movement of discovery begins within you. There is no possible friendship where you haven't yet arrived. There is no real connection where you haven't yet shown yourself. Your life can change, but it won't change by magic, nor by external rescue. It will change when you recognize that you need to be whole to be found. This requires practice, and all practice begins with a small gesture, repeated with intention. Choose one. Talk to someone without filtering so much. Share something that matters to you, even if it seems trivial. Don't say everything is fine when it's not. Respond with presence. Listen without rushing. Arrange a coffee with someone who respects your silence. Send a sincere message to someone you miss. Smile genuinely. Ask for help. Offer help. Say you're trying. Each act of this kind is a crack in the armor that time has built around you. And a crack, here, is a seed. Don't wait to be perfect to begin. You don't need to be healed to build connections. You need to be present. There's beauty in your broken pieces, too. It's not about offering the perfect version of yourself. It's about offering the available version. The one that, despite fears, traumas, and disappointments, still chooses to be. This presence transforms everything around, and especially within. Perhaps you still hear that inner voice saying that nobody cares, that nobody would notice your absence, that your pain is too small or too confusing. That voice isn't your enemy. It's the echo of what has gone unanswered for too long. Don't fight it. Respond. With facts. With actions. With the kind of gesture that disproves the abandonment. Each new, real presence in your life recalibrates that narrative. Each small encounter, however brief, has the power to rewrite what you believe about yourself. You are not alone because it is impossible to love. You are alone because you have lived in survival mode for too long. But now you know, it is possible to get out of this. And there is no single path. There is yours. It begins with the decision to break the cycle of silence. Not to shout, but to begin to be heard. Not to demand attention, but to offer truth. Truth, even when trembling, is irresistible. If you've made it this far, it's because something resonated with you. And if it resonated, it's because you're ready for the next step. And the next step isn't external. It's not about conquering, convincing, or proving. It's about sustaining. Sustaining who you are, even when no one applauds. Sustaining your search, even if it seems ridiculous to some. Sustaining your hope, even if it has been deflated so many times before. That is strength. That is courage. That is emotional maturity. You no longer need to justify your loneliness. It was part of a cycle. But cycles aren't sentences. They're invitations to transition. And transition happens when you allow yourself the risk of connection. With others? Yes. But first, with your own wholeness. Start today. Now. With something simple. Don't ignore what pulsates anymore. The world doesn't need more functional people. It needs awakened people. And awakening, in your case, begins with the decision not to disappear again. Breathe. Look around. Perhaps someone, at this very moment, is also waiting for a gesture from you. A look. A word. Your presence. And if there's no one around, be that someone for someone else. The presence you lack is often the presence you haven't yet had the courage to offer. Start the cycle. Make way. Change the frequency of your communication and see what comes back. This is the moment. Admit it to yourself. You deserve relationships that don't edit you, presences that don't tolerate you, but that choose you. And that begins with a single choice: to no longer abandon yourself. With each honest gesture, you reinforce this alliance with yourself. With each true word, you break a link with invisibility. With each new contact, you reaffirm, I am here, and that is enough. Some say the world is too cold, too fast, too shallow. That may even be true, but it doesn't have to be destiny. Each awakened person warms the atmosphere a little. Each honest connection deepens the fabric of reality a little. Each soulful word slows down unnecessary haste. So, be the interruption in automatism. Be the inviting pause. Be the reminder that living is more than just functioning. If this video touched you in any way, like it. If something resonated with you, comment, even anonymously. If this journey made sense, subscribe to the channel. Here, presence is more important than performance. And your presence, even if silent, is a sign that we are still alive and ready to start again.